recording now and uploading later on YouTube. Great. So good afternoon to everyone maybe up there watching the recording, and members of the public, members of the press. Good afternoon, and staff, Deputy Mayor and Councillor, welcome. Right, without too much further ado, I ask the Deputy Mayor of Karakia to get us underway.
Kia ki te Māori o te whenua, kuia ki te mana o te tangata, kuia ki te pono, te aroha, te piki, te eke, ki te tōmata, kuia tāia.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Right, and the agenda items is a couple of changes before we go to apologies. 5.8. 5.8 is going to be brought forward to after 5.1. So that is adoption of the investment policies and objectives. And that's a little change around there. No, cool. All right, apologies. I've got apologies from Councillor Leonard for lateness and Lachlan for full apology. Make the move, please. Thank you, Councillor Westman. Thank you, Councillor Fletcher. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against, carried. Right. Any conflicts of interest pertaining to the items today? No. Conflicts of interest. We will move on. Confirmation of the minutes of the last ordinary council meeting on the 27th of February 2024. Any points of clarification of those minutes? Councillor Taylor.
Yeah, one from me. I'm noted as joining late via Teams. I wonder if that should be changed to did not attend, thanks to my inability to use technology.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, technologically challenged, so I wasn't absent.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. All right, can I have a move for those minutes, please? Thank you. Thing by Councillor Williamson. Those minutes be accurate. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. Okay, 5.1, Matrix area, Holiday Park lease. Carol. And Scott Edinburgh.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Your Worship and Councillors. I've got Scott along with me because I'm going to talk a little bit about the reserve management plan and the connection with the lease. But Scott's team will be taking the lead on any lease negotiations going forward. So he's the expert in that area. So Council currently leases a portion of the Motateri Recreation Reserve to Trans-Tasman Holiday Parks Limited, and they've approached Council looking for a longer term lease. At this point in time, they've got 14 years left on their existing lease, and they're looking for an extended period up to a maximum of 33 years that you're allowed to give under the Reserves Act. In the report, you'll see that we've recommended that Council commences a renegotiation process to establish a new lease. And just to be very clear, if we negotiate a new lease, that would require a surrender of the existing lease. So the 14-year lease would be put aside and the new 33-year lease, or whatever period you decide on, would be put in its place. What we've also signalled in the report is, from our perspective, we believe that it's desirable to start the negotiation process now, but not adopt a new lease until the reserve management plan process has run its course. And that's because we see that there is the potential for connection between what's in the reserve management plan and potentially what is in any future lease. That could range from the extent of the reserve that's taken up by a campground. At our workshop earlier in the week, we were talking with the committee who's overseeing the management plan about different parts of the campground being used for different types of camping, which is a variation on what we currently have in place. There are issues around access and pedestrian thoroughfare and safety, which have come up. So that again could lead to some technical terms being placed in a lease. So we certainly see that there's a link between the two. The other aspect that you might want to consider is the risk around predetermination. We're obviously in the middle of a review process. If you decided to proceed with negotiating a lease and then approving that lease ahead of that reserve management plan process, then there could be a perception that council's got a predetermined position in terms of the management plan and its outcomes. Ultimately, we don't see there being a massive difference in terms of timeframes, and you would have seen we've touched on those in the report. If you proceed with the recommendation, which is to start the negotiations and then follow on after the adoption of the management plan, you can jump straight from the management plan into an adoption of the lease. If you decide to separate the two, then you'll need to undertake a separate consultation process specifically for the lease. And that's just a reflection of the fact that the management plan's 20 years old. It's got some elements in it which need updating, but also it's got elements in it which, well, it's got elements which are missing from it, particularly in terms of the cultural values around the site itself. So just to sum up, our intent will be to move as fast as possible on both processes, bearing in mind we're dealing with stakeholders on both processes. My experience in the past is that negotiations on leases can be complicated, particularly when you're dealing with public land and multiple parties who have an interest. Certainly we'll be looking to progress that as fast as possible so that that lease can dovetail in with the reserve management plan as efficiently as possible.
Just for transparency, because I'm just a little bit needing some clarity. So significance and engagement policies being triggered as with the lease being a significant decision, but the Reserves Act, which talks about mandatory consultation and legal considerations mentioned that as well. Whilst I personally don't have a problem with the processes running in parallel, are we doing this correctly? Because previously we'd had a fly line project which sort of didn't go as smoothly as it probably could have, and I think we all learned lessons from that. But I'm just hoping that we're following due correct process. That's my only question.
Yeah, well, so we've taken advice from Paul Beverley at Buddle Finlay as we've gone through not only the reserve management plan review process, but also we've been talking about how any lease negotiation would flow into that. So we're very comfortable that based on the advice we've had from Paul, that what we're doing is aligned. And this is where I guess it was quite important that I noted the risk of predetermination and the importance of making sure that you hold off any decision on the lease until such time as you have clarity about the reserve management plan and its outcomes.
That I've given Mr. Tilden some clarity and after his considered submission to us earlier today, I'm in favour of what he's doing.
You have a question, Councillor Westman.
Yeah, I've got a sort of similar problem. I'm concerned that we are doing the parallel process when we're going to have some answers in September, which doesn't seem that far away. So I don't quite know why the pressure's on us to actually make a call before then.
I think when we were talking about the different options and the pros and cons as officers, we were really conscious that it may take a number of months to negotiate lease terms. And we saw that there was some efficiencies which could be gained by having those conversations in parallel. Now that's obviously totally up to you as decision makers about whether you want to fully resolve the reserve management plan before beginning the lease negotiations. But if I think about some of the more transactional elements of that lease arrangement, we would need to get valuers involved, as an example, to understand the value of the property that we're looking to lease. Now, that all takes time, and we're really conscious that we've also got a lessee who's looking for as much certainty as fast as possible. We've also got people who utilise the campground and have a vested interest in the campground who are again looking for certainty as fast as possible. So that's where we saw that there was a compromise in terms of running the two processes in parallel, but making sure you had your decision making lined up in the correct order.
And so, having heard from the lessee, Mr. Tilton, earlier, prior to this meeting, are we correct in assuming that running these two processes in parallel will be the shortest, most efficient way of providing surety for the business going forward? That's one question, almost rhetorical. My second point is, or two other points, is around running the lease negotiations that will be done entirely independently of the planned review. I'm assuming that
there will be some passing of information between the two teams who will be looking at it. So, for example, at our workshop, it was last week, when we were talking about the reserve management plan, we were discussing potential areas like the lakefront, which could have different restrictions on camping. We'd want to feed that information through to the team that was discussing the lease with Trans-Tasman Holiday Parks, so that they could talk about how an arrangement like that might actually work on the ground.
By consultation, and my concern would be if we chose to run these two things, processes separately, there is a consultation requirement on both, and I'm conscious that in the minds of those who will be consulted with, it will look like we're simply repeating an earlier process. So in my mind, running them together with a single consultation process seems to me to be the most efficient way of doing it, so long as we're really clear about how we go about that.
Yeah. Just to be very clear on the consultation process, once you've drafted a reserve management plan, that goes out for public consultation. That would include clear statements about the future of the campground and how you expect it to be operated on the reserve space. Once that's locked into the reserve management plan, you can then proceed directly to approve a lease. You don't require necessarily to undertake consultation on the lease separately or even in parallel. So the reserve management plan consultation covers your requirements under the Reserves Act. The only time you would have a separate consultation process would be if you wanted to go ahead of the reserve management plan with the lease. Then you wouldn't be able to rely on the reserve management plan consultation. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thanks, Nick. You've explained all of that really well. I think arguably running the lease negotiations in parallel could be considered somewhat predetermined. I have some concerns around that. Entering into lease terms, for instance, when we're still going through the consultation process, to me is somewhat problematic. And if that is the way that the outcome of today is decided, I'd very much like to make it very clear to the parties that this is on a without prejudice basis, and that at the end of this process, there may be some changes to that final document to reflect what comes out of the reserve management plan. I don't want to lead anybody down the garden path to think that there won't be changes, because there very well could be. And I think we need to make that very, very clear from the outset to all parties, including the public, that we are not predetermining an outcome here, and that we're going through proper and due process on a without prejudice basis. I think that's key.
Yes.
Councillor Grimsley, then Councillor.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. I was just going to reiterate what Councillor Shepherd has said. Nick, would you remind us, please, the time frame for the consultation process at the moment?
So for the reserve management plan
Yes,
review,
so that, because that will be the process that will interest the public, where they will want to come along and have their thoughts known to us.
yes. So at this point, we're anticipating bringing draft reserve management plan up to the May meeting of the committee. And then we will get direction at that stage about whether the committee is comfortable for that to go out for consultation or not. And obviously I can't predetermine the decision of that committee. If they are, then we would be consulting over June and July. We're required to go out for 2 months. And then you'd move into hearings and deliberations. Yeah.
Yeah, so just on that is not far away. And, 14 years to run on a lease. If this had been maybe 2 or 5 years, I get it why there's a little bit of pressure on to actually negotiate it now. But we're talking 14 years, we're making a complicated process even more complicated and really sort of putting us in the line of fire on trying to make a decision when we haven't finished one process. So, I'm sort of still a bit concerned we're jumping the gun.
I'm sorry. Councillor Campbell.
Yes, I'll just make a couple of notes. Though. I mean, you'd be aware that last meeting several weeks ago, it was my notice of motion to try and put a firm timeline on this to be able to offer certainty. And I believe that timeline was July was Mr. Tilton's time frame that I'm aware of to satisfy OAI overseas information, overseas investment agency requirements. This doesn't really sound as if that was doing this consultation for the lease after the reserve management plan consultation. This doesn't sound as if it's going to meet those timeframes at all, and I'm somewhat concerned that this is could be running him out of town. That's a comment of mine. Second thing is it's interesting you're just pointing out some shortcomings of the existing reserve management plan. I've been submitting exactly those questions. What are the shortcomings? Some time ago, I never received an answer to that. But get on to some questions. The inference I could see from this paper here, I'll go for it on you. For the existing holiday park lease, because I think a couple of the options were inferring that provided that the lease conforms with the reserve management plan, well, the inferences for the future management plan, that public consultation would not be required to give a new lease or lease extension. So my question really is, well, under the 2004 reserve management plan, which has been there for some time, I know Mr. Tilton's been requesting a new lease since about 2017 or where. Why then could that not have happened under that reserve management plan? Why was it not taken seriously then? So that's a question.
Okay. So there's a little bit in that. Let me start by saying that under the Reserves Act, there's a presumption that leases are publicly consulted on before council considers granting them, or an administering body for that matter considers granting them. So that's the presumption in the Act. The Act then goes on in section 54 to talk about an exception where if a reserve management plan expressly provides for a lease, council can choose not to consult before granting that lease. In this context, we're dealing with a reserve management plan which is 20 years old and we know is deficient in a number of areas, particularly in terms of the cultural aspects. So having taken legal advice, that made it very clear that council runs a substantial risk given the council runs a substantial risk relying on the reserve management plan from 20 years ago to grant another 33-year lease. So it's a combination of factors. One, the age of the management plan. Two, our awareness that it's got some deficiencies, particularly in terms of the cultural sites. And then three, a reflection on the longevity of the intended lease that would flow from this. All of which leads to a place where our expert advice is that you would want to consult the community before granting a new lease.
Well, I just find it interesting because, well, when Mr. Sullivan was first asking for it, 2016, 2017, it wasn't 20 years old, it was something like 13 years old. So that's actually not very old. And now I'm hearing that there's cultural shortcomings in it. I hadn't heard that before, and okay. I don't know what to say for that one. I don't. Just yeah.
Well, I think just to respond to that, the other thing to be conscious of is the broader context between 2017 and 2019 when council was discussing with Mr. Tilton lease arrangements. That was at a time when Ngāti Te Wharaotoa was going through the treaty settlement process. And as part of that, this specific reserve was on the table to be considered for transfer from the Crown back to Te Wharaotoa. So it would have been inappropriate for council at that stage to grant a new lease for 33 years when that treaty settlement process was underway. Also, through that treaty settlement process, that raised a number of issues around the cultural significance of that site. So those became known to council at that time. So while I totally understand Mr. Tilton's come from a place of looking for certainty, that's run into some challenges in that broader context because we have a piece of land which has been under some dispute. And now we've got some clarity around who's going to be administering it and the fact that it's not part of a treaty settlement, we've been able to progress with the reserve management plan. And now we're here talking to you about progressing the negotiations on a new lease as well.
Just jump in really briefly, and sorry, Nick, originally answering on your behalf, in terms of the current reserve management plan, apart from being 20 years old, its deficiency is not just in the cultural space. It also talks about two entities that no longer exist. Transit New Zealand, for a start, does not exist anymore, and the Turangi Community Board does not exist anymore. So on that basis alone, you have two entities referred to as being involved in the management plan who aren't here. The second point is that much of the plan is written in terms of future tense things that will be done 20 years ago. They're no longer future tense, they're past tense. It's all water under the bridge. So if you're relying on something that has a future focus from 20 years ago, it's nonsensical. Sorry, I'll hand it back to you.
Thank you. Councillor Truman.
Yeah, so I'm also concerned just about the prejudice of if we do this in parallel. I would like to see that we did the reserve management plan first. I don't have a problem if we're gathering information, like so if it was getting the valuations done or things like that, it's information gathering. I don't have a problem with that, but I don't think any negotiations should happen until after we see what it's going to look like. In fairness to all parties, really, especially the community as well as the.
Okay. Councillor Campbell.
Oh, yeah, just my other question here. So there's concerns that there might potentially be some conflicting intentions with the reserve management plan and a lease if you're negotiating them at the same time. Have you discussed with Mr. Tilton these potential issues and whether that could be wangled into lease options? If this happens, then A, if that happens, B, I mean, has Has that happened?
Oh, we haven't begun negotiations
No,
on any lease terms.
Well, I'm just, it just seems that there's an assumption here that,
When you want to, bring the car out,
Mm.
go away and get valuation and all that,
Mm.
do some pre conversation.
But we were very conscious that we have a reserve management plan process which is underway, and we're really conscious that we also had a leasee who was looking to secure certainty for his financial arrangements going forward. And there's a balance to be found between those two processes. And that was why this paper's been brought to you, to find your level of comfort about starting some of those conversations, or whether you wish to hold off those conversations until the management plan is done. That's really the purpose of being here today.
That with the reserve management plan, currently we must go out and consult on a lease of a certain length of time. And can it be worked into the reserve management plan that we can negate that to make it a simpler process in future? And so to my mind, actually getting through the reserve management plan is quite a priority, which will feed into any lease agreement thereafter. So in which case I'm thinking that there could be some fairly significant changes to a lease document that's prepared in advance of a reserve management plan. Is that have I got the grasp of that?
You have. I guess what I would say is, like most planning processes, a reserve management plan is a bit like a funnel, in that you start out with a whole lot of different ideas and different issues. And then as you work through that review process, that planning process, you really narrow down the areas of conflict. And that's exactly the process that the committee is working through at this point. So over a number of months, I would expect that we would get to a point where there are elements that could go into a lease agreement and there'd be no argument about those whatsoever. There might be 3 or 4 which are absolutely critical, where there are areas of concern, and you would want to wait till the very end, once you had nailed a reserve management plan process, before you finalise those lease terms going into the agreement.
Thank you, Nick. Actually, you sort of said what I was going to say, really. The crucial word in option 3 is begin. And I am on that committee, and there is no crossover between that committee and the council's lease negotiations. They are entirely separate. But I will also say, I think, we're talking about probably a relatively good cost-saving exercise here by running those two things in tandem instead of having them separately. And we're very mindful of present that council's looking at cost saving wherever they go. That wouldn't inhibit in any way the process that is actually being undertaken at present. The people are on the committee are being very open and very forthright in their views. Having said that, Mr. Tilton has been exactly the same. And just as an aside, I have done a little bit of homework on this type of it is impossible to sell a property or do anything on a property under a 10-year lease. When you think about the amount of money involved and how long it has to be for it to amortise that investment, I think that for the people of the district, and certainly the people who come into the district and use this facility, I think the certainty of both of those things going in tandem is positive for all of us. I think that knowing that we are beginning the lease negotiations and nothing will go into that lease until it's gone through the reserve management plan. And on the other side, those of us who are on the Reserve Management Plan Committee know that we've got the fullness of time to be able to say exactly what we want to say, get our ideas down on paper and funnel through those things. And I'm sure there'll be sticky things. There's always sticky things in these things. That's how they work. I wonder, Your Worship, whether it's appropriate for me to move that we accept the recommendation. No, there's other people who wish to speak.
Yeah,
Yes, no, thank you. But I personally am recommending what the council officers have said, that it works for both parties. And I think all negotiations that work for both parties are the best options.
Moved by Councillor Greenslade, just so we have the conversation. I got a second at this stage. Oh, no, right now, on the sort of.
Discussion.
Okay, well, it's been moved. I'm happy to open discussion for people to carry on if you like, but I will call for a second shortly. Councillor Williamson.
I think Councillor Brett has been reading my notes, so you pretty much yeah, I think basically I don't have trouble seeing any predetermination decision making running parallel with the ability so the committee running process. It's working in progress, nothing to be predetermined. And the expedited process, the most efficient way is option 3. And I raise trust in their committee running for their council of bonding to public conclusion. And nothing to be determined. The decision to be made is tentatively with the RFP is adopted actually then. But having the lease progressing the lease discussion with Mr. Tilton, I think is probably right way to go. So it's for the option 3.
Thank you. You're in favour of the written. Right, who was next? Sorry. Councillor Park. And Councillor Campbell.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I just actually following what Councillor Greenslade said, I just would have changed my mind a bit about to keep the likes of yourself safe, being on that RMP committee and considering your personal recommendation, I actually wonder if we need to complete the RMP process first before we start negotiations, regardless of option 3 or 4. Mr. Tilton's OIO discussions are his and his alone to have with them, and not something that should be influencing council decisions. So I'm actually leaning in favour of option 4, but I'm looking forward to hearing further.
Okay. Councillor Campbell.
Yes, well, two things. One, if we're going to just, one is another question. You're recommending option 3. When's the earliest? Well, what firm time frame? If we went with option 3, what firm time frame for granting a new lease could you give?
Absolutely none, and that we don't know whether those negotiations would be concluded in 5 days or 5 months. That's up to the parties involved, so we couldn't give any firm time frame whatsoever.
My take on this really is that it comes down to how much we value Mr. Tilton as the leaseholder. That's what I put this down to. If we're neither here nor there, then option 4 is the most convenient for us because we can just take our time, isn't it? I mean, we'll wait for new RMP to be opted, and we know everything 100%, and then we can let new lease. If we value his contribution to the district, then we should be doing our utmost, and that's option 2, and making it work and discussing with Mr. Tilton, because obviously there are some uncertainties. There are, because RFP hasn't been consulted with, but maybe, just maybe, perhaps some of those uncertainties can be taken into consideration with the writing of the lease. I'm suggesting that. I'm recommending that. I mean, if it doesn't work out, if it comes to a full stop because there's just some irreconcilable differences with the management plan and that they've identified, then it can't happen, can it? But you don't know till you try. So I'm putting this down to how much this council values Mr. Tilton as the current leaseholder, and it sounds to me as if he's made it done good for the district. And I mean, I would like to ask, I would like to have asked the question of, do we know how much he that holiday park, what value is that to the district? But well,
Western and Councillor Taylor.
And maybe Scott, you might be getting into this, but I think it's really important for us sitting around the table today to know if we are thinking we're going to run a parallel system for this process, is if we're talking about a new lease of 30-odd years, is there a value that's already been discussed? I know we aren't preconceiving anything, but there will be a value to that new lease.
Yes, that is correct. Yeah, there would be a new value to that lease. Again, this is around, to use the key word is to begin those negotiations of what that would look like. We would look at we would get valuations in for that long projected view. But at the start, it would just be about the value as it stands between the reserve management plan and the negotiation. So that will tease that out.
Councillor Taylor. Thank you, Your Worship. Coming back to a point that Councillor Shepherd made before, and I don't know whether it holds any legal weight, but if we were to insert the words without prejudice in there, that gives more comfort to others. I'm also on the committee. I just also respond to Councillor Campbell's comments. I'm sorry, but that's an inappropriate use of a subjective analysis of a personal value. This is an objective process. We're dealing with a lease, not with an individual's value, however you want to measure it. And that's an inappropriate way of framing this. And I'm quite happy once it's moved to second it, but I would suggest we insert the words as suggested by Councillor Shepherd.
Could I just respond to that, please?
Councillor Campbell.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure what you're saying. I'm not sure exactly what you're saying, given Councillor Taylor, but any value I'm talking about is value to the district. Value to the district of Mr. Tilton's business. He could be running a ski field, he could be running any old thing here, but that's what I'm putting it to. That's quite an objective. That's what we're supposed to be taking consideration in the value to the district. That's I see that as my job.
The reply to the reply. So thank you for that clarification. Those are not the words you use, and if you replay the tape, I think you'll find that is the case.
Okay, we will move on. The mover, there's been a suggestion for the mover that we up the shepherd and without prejudice. You have
I can't see any reason why we wouldn't do that. I'll just add that running the two processes in tandem to me is a very sensible way to do it. It's what the staff recommended, and those of us who are on the committee are fully aware of the huge input that's coming into our committee. So I'm quite happy with that. Yes.
Yeah, I'll just follow up on my reasoning to the without prejudice wording, and that is because even though we might be negotiating these terms in parallel, it doesn't mean that we can't go back then and make changes to what we've already agreed, because that's the risk that we're taking by entering into negotiation before there's a reserve management plan in place. So I think it's really important to make that clear to the lessee as well, the lessor rather, because I have heard through this process that there was a bit of a misunderstanding around wording. In good faith, for instance, doesn't mean we will, it means we will assist. So I think we just got to be really clear in our wording so that we don't lift expectations and then have to come back and it be a surprise.
Yes, Mr. Carroll, I'm sure he covered that off.
Well, can I just one last question?
Well, Councillor Pitcher first, and then Campbell.
Yeah, I just wanted to agree with Councillor Shepherd's corridor around the predetermination of running the two in tandem. That really did stick out for me, and I really do believe that we should be running the resource management plan, I think, to the nth degree, because we're engaging, I think, all the right people. I acknowledge, obviously, my fellow councillors who are a part of that makeup, but also Ngāti Turangi, who have been really being able to assist in identifying places and spaces specifically of historical significance. I just wrote quickly down Ngā Tōrangi, who has a tūohu called Mahurihure, which is around Motutere there, and between Ngā Tōrangi and Te Rangi-Ita, the ancestor, there's 16 generations. And then from Te Rangi-Ita, the ancestor, through to our descendants today, there's another 16 odd generations there too. So these sites are hugely culturally significant to us, and I think we need to take our time in ensuring that we're doing right by this process, which is probably why I'm leaning more towards option 4 at this stage.
Okay, it's been moved.
Just one,
Councillor Campbell.
just a question for Scott, really. Option 2, I mean, if I read the wording of it, begin the negotiation process and decide whether to grant the lease prior to RMP adoption. That obviously, well, to me, that reads as if there's definitely a possibility that you might decide not to grant the lease prior to RMP. So in my mind, I'm not convinced that's not doable. What do you think?
Again, it's like what Nick referenced earlier. Negotiations can take 5 days, or they can take 5 months. I met Mr. Tilton for the first time today, introduced myself. Unfortunately, I can't give a definitive answer to that question.
Moved by Councillor Greenslade, seconded by Councillor Taylor. Recommendation as it is here with the words.
Which is.
Can I ask all those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Okay, hands up, please, for the people in favour.
I want to see the finished resolution, but
Those against? Recommendation is carried. You did, Councillor.
Yes.
Recommendation is in here.
You against that?
I thought it was-
The whole time.
Sorry, hold on.
Yeah.
Hold on.
think about what the bid after.
So the recommendation is for option 3.
But the recommendation is carried. Okay, now it's 25.8. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. And 5.8. Thank you. And we have Jeanette. Introducing our special guest here today. Jeanette or Sarah?
All right, I can do it. You stay there. Here we go. Yeah. I think that.
Okay. I'm looking gentleman here. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Afternoon, Your Worship, Deputy Mayor and Councillors. Thank you for receiving us today. Thank you.
And yeah, so probably just quickly before the team at Forsyth Bar start. So the report was obviously to adopt the SIPO and Treasury Management Policy. As you'll see in the options, we didn't assess the risk with the SIPO within that, because this is for our authorised financial advisors to discuss with you. So just wanted to point out that point of clarification that we've talked about the risk in adopting the changes to the Treasury Management Policy and adopting the SIPO, but it's for you to satisfy yourself of the risk of the SIPO itself today. So that's why these guys are here. And as you're aware, we've already had a couple of workshops with Forsyth Bar to get to this place. But any further queries, I'll leave with these guys.
Very good. Good afternoon, gentlemen. Have you doubled our fund?
By you adding money, we are getting there. We are making good progress, yes. So yes, thank you for Sarah. So by way of recap, we've had a couple of workshops on the subject of the asset allocation methodologies and also the responsible investing policies. And I might add my apologies for our colleagues Matt Henry and Katie Peace, who are unable to be with us today. The document we circulated was, as far as I'm aware, what was basically discussed and tentatively decided was appropriate at our last workshop, with a move from a conservative to a balanced asset allocation per the discussions we'd had, and with the amendments to the responsible investing policy as discussed at that meeting. So I guess we're here to see if there's any further questions, queries, comments or concerns, or acceptance.
Looking at the policy there and where we're looking to invest and not to invest, and we have very muchly followed the current rules from travel. At what point or how frequently do we review this? Or is this set in stone for X amount of years? Or what does that look like moving forward?
It can be reviewed annually between ourselves and council. Now, I'd expect that revisions will be slight. However, if there's a change in the wind, then we can respond to that on that basis.
Just to that point, I do appreciate the time that you've given to us previously to coming to this decision and the honesty and the challenge that we provided and the challenge that was provided back. There were a lot of robust discussions, so thank you for the calibre and the quality of those discussions. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you. The only thing I'd add is, from a timing point of view, we have a hard date of the 30th of April for the current setup to be fully implemented. If there's to be any variation to that, or if this is not to be adopted, we'd seek some further time to be able to work through any other changes. So.
One, two, and three. No change to that, Sarah or Jeanette? Happy with that? Okay, could I have a movement, please? Thank you, Councillor Park. By Councillor Taylor. 1, 2, and 3 are adopted. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carry.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you. Takes long enough to get through the roadworks to get here.
Thank you.
Afternoon, Your Worship and councillors. I'll take the item as read, but as a quick, I guess, overview of these two sets of fees and charges. Basically, for some time now, particularly in the dog registration space, there hasn't been any meaningful increase in those dog registration fees. And so progressively over time, as cost increases have happened in the business units across all of council's business units, the percentage of the amount of money being collected from fees and charges has not been necessarily aligned with our revenue and financing policy. This means that it's slowly slipping out of those bands that are set in that policy. And it means currently, if the existing charges stay where they are, council will under collect. Based on the forecasting of the expenditure for that business unit and based on the proposed increases, we can push that back up and delay that shift. It won't fully rectify the problem, which is why we have to do a Section 80 consideration, which is outlined in the paper, as this decision would technically be inconsistent with your revenue and financing policy. The proposal inside of the recommendation is that you then address this through the long-term plan process, where the revenue and financing policy is then fully reviewed. So you can then make a decision on how you would like to go about addressing this particular problem. The reason why that's not happening, these fees aren't being set in conjunction with that revenue and financing policy, in conjunction with that LTP process, is that food licensing fees and dog registration fees must be set in the financial year, so that they can actually be charged. Otherwise, if you don't set them for financial year, they cannot be then set till the following financial year under the respective acts. For food licensing fees, there's some proposed increases due to just the cost of officers' time broadly, but there's also a significant amount of officers' time was going unbilled for food licensing. So there was a number of issues around rechecking premises and not being able to accurately and correctly recuperate that cost in officers' time for those continual reassessments, particularly of establishments that needed multiple reassessments to get through their food licensing process. That then has basically the business unit there for the food health officers have recommended that we add a new fee for these continual reassessments to accurately capture that time. So that way ratepayers don't effectively subsidise that activity for continual reassessments. There's an incentive to get your ducks in a row and sort out your establishment, and then the officers come and do their inspection and do their good work that they do. I'm happy to take any questions.
Could you please explain what a domestic food business levy is? I've tried to Google it.
So
it's just told me that it's a levy. It hasn't told me what it does.
So that's MPI's new levy that they're proposing. So that's you're talking about the MPI levy?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's from MPI. That's their new levy. They basically want to collect more revenue for the activities that they do in terms of food regulation practices. Yeah.
So what does that mean? So who needs?
Yes.
So it's for somebody that would be making cakes in their own kitchen at home and then selling them at a market or have a store or online perhaps. So that's what the domestic food business levy is.
So it's a home business.
Yes, essentially, if you're making chutneys or cakes or something and then selling them, but you weren't using a commercial kitchen.
And that's
Andrew, you mentioned that general jobs increase. That hasn't moved for a few years.
That's correct. So that $65 may have been for previous charges. So in 2013, I believe the fee for a general dog registration was $110, $111. It's more expensive than it is now back then. Those fees then shifted in 2013 or 14. I'd have to double check that to be absolutely certain of that date. But those fees then shifted when there was a change from the removal of rural dog and a few other issues related to dog registration. That fee then moved to $93 and was $93 for quite some time and is now $95. So very minimal shift in the last decade in that charge. On top of that, there's also discounts for D6 dogs and for responsible dog owners. They get a discount on top of that fee. So in real terms, that fee is not particularly high, especially when we look back on the history of those dog fees. The proposal today outlines that for most people that this will be about a $10 to $15 increase in the dog registration fee, depending on whether or not you've got a responsible owner discount and you've got a D6 dog discount. That then pushes it even lower than that.
Yeah, thank you for that. I would suggest, and somehow through the consultation, that dog owners appreciate that all ratepayers pick up the bulk of a dog fee. As a non-dog owner, I don't mind because I'm pretty holistic about the district itself. But I just think it would be good for them just not to think, well, what's council putting this up for again, without appreciating that actually between 50 and 70% is actually done under the UAGC.
Yeah, so that's outlined in the consultation documentation that ultimately there's a split, and our 1013 determinations have always said through our long-term plans have always said that, hey, there's a split here. There's the dog owners or animal owners broadly, but only dogs are required to be registered at this stage by council, that generate the need for animal control to exist. But then there's also the safety element of having animal control officers to be able to do their good work, to be able to collect an animal from the street, whether that's a happy-go-lucky dog that's lost in the road that we don't want to unfortunately perish, but also dogs that are a bit more aggressive or causing issues in our community. We don't want somebody to be harmed by one of those animals.
Yeah, I don't think we should be doing this in this current economic climate. I feel that a dog is something that brings a person a lot of joy. I've just Google searched the Taupō District Council neutered dog rate is $58. We're not looking at anywhere near as low as that. There are a number of animals being put down at the moment because people can't afford them. I just don't think we should be adding something else to their shoulders with enough to burden. Most dogs don't see dog control. It's a fee for having a dog, but they're not necessarily using the services, I'll be honest, and it is a contribution to the whole, and that's what we're saying, it is the whole, but most people are responsible dog owners, and it's actually covering those that aren't, so why are we penalising them more? That's what I think. I think we should not be doing that this year.
Councillor Greenfield.
Thank you, Your Worship. It was sort of following on from what Councillor Leonard is saying. I think those people who cause the greatest harm are the ones who should be paying for it. I don't see why I should be responsible for people who are irresponsible. And when you talk about animal control, there's a huge big gap in animal control in rabbits in my district. So if we're talking about animal control, we could maybe raise some more money there and start looking at rabbits. But I agree with Councillor Leonard in that not penalising responsible dog owners and people who look after their dogs and care for them. But perhaps those who do incur the costs are possibly the ones that should be paying a little bit more for that. Hitting a person in the pocket is always a good deterrent.
Councillor Taylor.
I disagree and partially agree with both my colleagues. I think this is a time to increase the fees, but I disagree with the proportionality aspect of this. So you've got a working dog, 18% increase. I know it's only $6, but percentage-wise, that's huge. But if I flick over the page, it's only a 13% increase for a dog that's impounded. And the first time only my mother was thinking, to take Councillor Greenslade's comments, if you're going to penalise those who are causing the most work for the staff or council, that's where we should hike it up to the point where if you don't want your dog, we don't want to pay the fee, don't put your dog in a position where it gets impounded. Make a financial disincentive to behave poorly. That would be my comments on that. So, sorry, and on that, if we were to increase those fees substantially more than that, I would not have any difficulty with that at all.
Councillor Campbell.
Also, just a question that just occurred to me now, maybe it's in here, barking, noise complaints on dogs. I mean, is there a penalty for that? Or is that that's only if they get impounded?
So yeah, your dog there'd only be a problem if your dog was actually impounded. Noise control, broadly speaking, is is a separate issue. Yeah.
Oh, did they?
Through the chair, there's also barking processes for barking dogs as specified in the Dog Control Act, and the outcome could be either an abatement notice where the dogs are impounded, or there's infringement notices as well. So there's other tools that are outside of the fees and charges.
So the dog may end up being impounded as a result of its barking, but then you would only be penalised because the dog has been impounded.
Yeah.
You're not going to be penalised because the dog barks.
Andrew, this can have.
Correct.
So,
so the
you're saying you're not covering costs now, eh?
Correct. So right now, the amounts that are prescribed in the revenue and financing policy are not being met by current fees and charges. So they won't be met under the current system. So that means your rates, the UAGC, has to cover more of the cost of that business unit. So if you choose, which well within your right to do so, to choose to not increase the fees and charges, then it means that you've got to get the money from somewhere else, from the UAGC. In particular, that's under the current revenue and financing policy. That could be amended through the long-term plan process. That's one of the options which you could explore as a way to resolve this conflict. if you change the policy itself to shift those bands, you absolutely can do that. You then need to make sure that you have a robust rationale under section 1013 that explains why the general public should pay potentially more than 70% of the cost of dog control, and that the people who have a dog pay less than 26 to 28% that they pay now.
Dog control or animal control?
It's animal control broadly, but the primary driver is dogs.
So people that own horses that get out on the road, they don't have to register their horses. The stock that get out on the road don't have to register.
Not through council, though.
But someone whose dog gets out on the road has to register their dog.
Yep. Due to the Dog Control Act.
So when you go back to that crossing across the community and charges, it's not just dogs that animal control are controlling, it's other animals as well.
Yeah, peacocks, roosters, chickens, chickens.
All right. But thank you, Andrew, very well. It's normal, and we'll go out and see what people say.
Before we go out for consultation, just so we're clear, are there any amendments you want to make as a council to that fees and charges schedule before it goes out for consultation?
Yeah, just really quick. So I think it was a good point. Just say when you look at a Portuguese ones, you know, there it has neutered dog and it's got the amount. You've got to take $13 off our fees. I'm just saying for people looking at it, they just see that first price without going down and then go, oh, I got to take that off. I just wonder whether we can.
Yeah, so in the consultation, we've said in the document, we've said that that's between $10 and $15, depending on if they've got the discount in terms of that increase. But we can make that more clear for them, absolutely.
Oh, Councillor Campbell. Yeah, you know, thinking on fly again, de-sexing dogs, it costs money for people to do that.
Correct.
Any idea how much roughly it costs? I mean,
I couldn't tell you off the top of my head what a de-sex dog costs.
Is that something?
It's around, I think it's about $130 to even $230.
Is that something we?
It's based on the weight of the animal.
Yeah. Oh.
It's to do with the anesthetics based on the weight of the animal.
No, I was just wondering if that's something we could be subsidising, because it prevents problems down the line.
Central government has previously provided some funding for neutering of animals, and specifically it was actually around pit bulls. So it's probably not something that we have looked at subsidising before. The way that we incentivise it is through our fees and charges. So if you've got a neutered dog, you get to check the registration bit. There's also requirements for certain dogs to be neutered as well.
Councillor Taylor.
So we could ask the question, is there anything we want to change this before we adopt it? So we raised that.
There's lots I'd like to change, including the working dogs. If you live on Lochinvar Station and you've got 20 working dogs, you're up for $800 and those dogs never see anything but that station.
Yes, believe so. I'd have to double check the exact wording of the policy. Yep, I'll go.
Per shepherd per station, so is it per owner or is it per property? And I'd suggest that it might not be.
People are dog breeders.
Yeah, I believe that was the rural dog other problem with breeding and that situation, which would have caused a massive problem.
Anyway, back to what was. Can I suggest then that those who create the least work for council and incur the least amount of cost have a slightly lesser percentage increase than those that create all the problems, the high end of which ends up for the dog control committee, pay a substantially higher proportion, and you've got a whole lot of differential there. There's 13, 16, 18%. I would suggest that we increase round that up to say 20% and whatever that comes out of the dollar amount, round that up again to the nearest whole dollar, just as a suggestion on those like dog impounding fees, replacement tag if you lose it. Well, pay a bit more. His dog is after hours impounding fee, sustenance and care, and so on and so on. My suggestion would be, if you're going to create an impact and drive change, that's what we're doing. And those who are not creating the problem, like working dogs, I know it's only $6, but it's 18%. And those who are responsible, we give them 18% discount. I know it's only $6, but maybe we take a bit more off there, just as a suggestion.
I don't think I see Ross in the background. I would suggest that other people that least debate, think that dogs go down and all that sort of thing. I could be wrong. I'm not going to.
Yeah, I wonder because it's such I wonder because it's such a small number that it wouldn't actually make up the shortfall to bridge that gap between how short funded we are currently. There wouldn't be enough, this is a horrible thing to say, there wouldn't be enough infringement to cover the cost differential, am I right?
Through the chair, yeah, that's correct. The majority of the fees and charges revenue for that business unit comes from dog registration. That's where the majority of that revenue comes from. So you're talking about, off the top of my head, it's about $480,000 comes just from dog registration alone.
Sorry, I'll submit and then declare a conflict of interest on the basis.
Through the chair, the other option is that we go out to consult on these particular numbers, and that when we come to you with a final report, having heard what you have said and then hear what the community also says, we'll make amendments based on that.
Just wanted to say, Andrew, multiple dog applications only in the urban area, following on from what Councillor Leonard just said.
Because on a certain size section around urban.
Right, but why could it not follow through for working dogs? Multiple dog application fee for 2 dogs or more from working dogs. I mean, it needs some sort of clarification like that. What Councillor Leonard said is right. Nobody with a working dog only has 1 dog. And the other thing I just wanted to ask you about impounding fee for other animals. I presume the other animals is most likely horses.
I'm not sure which animal is most likely.
Yes.
Horses, chickens, yeah, everything else. I couldn't tell you off the top of my head what the most impounded other animal is other than a dog. Probably a cat, perhaps.
Just I do know that we have quite a few horses which have been picked up, and $90 doesn't sound like it to me.
Been moved by Councillor Park. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carry. Right, moving on, we are taking. Yeah. Item number 2. Right, 5.3, adoption of the solid waste bylaw proposal for consultation. Who we got? Oh,
Me, it's me again, yeah. No, it's myself again. So as you will all recall, we had a workshop talking about the solid waste bylaw, and you gave us a really clear set of direction around your uncomfortableness with creating another piece of paperwork that people have to fill out. So officers have gone away and basically stripped that out of the proposal. And what we're proposing is effectively a rollover of the existing bylaw while the new solid waste or potential new solid waste scheme is discussed, worked out, and looked at through the long-term plan. So this bylaw will protect the current system until such time as any new system, if there is one, rolls out. And if not, it carries on the status quo as is. The other thing that's important to note is that you will receive a WMP through the long-term plan. That waste management and minimisation plan basically outlines council's objectives around solid waste management, and one of those objectives in there will be talking about how council will look to use financial incentives to help improve diversion opportunities. So that will be, you will potentially get a few more papers coming from Brent saying, hey, actually, there's this really good opportunity has opened up. I would like to, I recommend that council explore this option, and we can then provide a diversion rate of X, which is cheaper than the tip face rate for wood disposal or for whatever opportunities the market brings up. Currently, under this bylaw and with that WMP in place through the LTP, that will enable Brent to be able to come and do that without having to do an annual process for setting those fees. That will enable basically those opportunities when they arise for council to respond to the market. As Brent will tell you, those new market opportunities have a limited amount of capacity, and that capacity gets eaten up pretty quickly. Because everybody wants to divert their green waste or divert whatever to these things where they can get it cheaper or free or even make money off some of these products that are being diverted. So very quickly will those places reach capacity. So we need to make sure we're a bit more dynamic. So in response to your guys' feedback, to the elected members' feedback, where we've changed that approach and are going to go harder on using the fees and charges and financial incentives to do so. Correct. Yeah, we have a subcommittee to hear and deliberate on this particular bylaw. Yeah.
Then the new bins and things like that?
No. So this is purely just the existing, basically the existing bylaw, with some minor changes to some definitions that were a little bit unclear. Purely to protect, this bylaw will lapse soon. It will lapse if we don't do something in September. And this bylaw protects the existing system, the existing solid waste system. So the current curbside collection has licensing conditions and those kinds of rules for solid waste contractors, as well as for private waste accumulation and that kind of thing around public health outcomes. This is not about the current system.
Changes. It was changing the order where the items listed from the front end to the back end of the. Why was that? I was trying to understand why.
It didn't read clearly. So when you read it, in terms of that core that definition, when you read it, it's like a definitive list or then anything else, as opposed to saying this is a prohibition on sharp items such as these kinds of things. It was like a knives are prohibited, this is prohibited, or anything else. Well, it's not plain English, basically. That's the only reason to change it.
I'd just like to extend my thanks.
What about this change?
I just wanted to extend my thanks for listening to our feedback and incorporating it into the paper here. But I guess also it shows that we're looking a little bit long term as well. I mean, solid waste minimisation, it's a really fascinating space at the moment. It's moving all the time. And I think this buys us a bit of time to get it right as well and get a bit of buy-in, because it's going to take a lot of buy-in from tradies, especially to get their heads around it all. So I'm really pleased with the approach that we're taking, and I look forward to seeing what's available in the waste minimisation space going forward.
That's one name.
Oh, Councillor Westbrook. Yeah. Yeah, that's right.
It's a three, doesn't it? Just that I've got so many different people in the area. I've got such different views on it.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so we've got Councillor Fletcher, Councillor Shepherd,
Exactly.
and Councillor Westbrook. Good move. 1, 2, 3. Are you happy? If you want me to add a 4.
I don't mind. And,
look, I'm quite busy actually, so I don't mind sitting down if it's you.
You can have 4, can't we?
The terms of reference will say 3, but that's a governance question, I suppose. Can they have 4? 7-2. Yeah.
I don't expect. Yeah, I'm quite happy with some of the greens that take nice, but I'm quite extended. So a few committees that I'm on.
Just I'm thinking of geographic. You okay? Yep. The councillor Greenslade, Fletcher and West. And so moving 1, 2, 3, and 2 back. And seconded by councillor Park. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against, carried. Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you.
Good to see you. Right. 5.5, budget transfer for Turangi and Whareroa water treatment plant upgrade. Good afternoon, Noel.
Good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, today I'm after approval for budget transfers for 2 of our fundamental water supply projects at Turangi and Whareroa. This is in line with expectations set by the regulator to have protozoa barriers in place as soon as possible. We're proposing to move money from our Motuopa drinking water supply project, which is available in the current year, and that project's a little bit behind. So we've got some funding there that we can move. Overall, it'll be sort of cost neutral because we'll just do an adjustment in the LTP. So the 2 projects that need the money would have been funded fully in year 1 of the LTP, but we're just trying to do them faster to meet Te Mata Arawa's expectation. So take the paper as read. And Motuopa. Yeah, in year 1 of the LTP. So it won't delay the Motuopa project. They're a little bit behind just through design at Kinloch and Amori, which is sort of the first 2 membrane plants on the way, but Motuopa is in design. We're forecasting to spend 1.2 million there this year already, and the balance will come in year 1 of the LTP. Right. Thank you.
Speaker Safety Program, 5.5. General fitness education. You're riding my scooter.
We do have a prop.
Good afternoon, ladies. Welcome.
Good afternoon. Thank you for your time today. Hopefully just a quick resolution required from you today for us to make an application to the Lion Foundation to support the delivery of a new program by Sarah and her team, the scooter safety program. It's, if you want to talk through it, or do you want me to?
Yeah, or basically keeping our tamariki safe. So there's lots of kids that already scoot to and from school. We want to target year 3 and 4 students. And just make sure they're doing it safely. So talk about sneaky driveways, stopping and starting, safe crossing points, things like that. So it'll be a nice lead into what we're already doing with the Pedal Safe program.
Thank you, Sarah. And this is a great initiative, and I'm fully support it. I'm just curious about Ruben, the road safety vet. He used to always go into the schools and
yep, he still does.
Daycares about sneaky driveways and things. So
yep,
still exists?
Still does. They come from Hamilton to Taupo once for 1 week of the year. But they were supposed to come this term, but they put it off to term 2. So yeah, they mainly target the preschools, early learning, and some primary schools as well in the district.
So can I just ask, I mean, this is quite a small amount of money in the big scheme of things. Is this just coming to us because it's going to a gaming?
Yes, so all applications we make to Gaming Trust have to have a resolution from you. So this is one of the smallest projects that we're working on, and we'll be coming to you over the next few months with a few larger applications as well to different gaming trusts. They all have different stand down periods, which is why we're targeting this one, because we can submit a couple of applications each year with the Lion Foundation.
Quick question, does this amount cover the full cost of it, of the implementing that program?
The 23 scooters and 23 helmets. We have to be very nice.
So yeah, that would implement getting a loan fleet, which would be critical to us offering this to schools. It's the same with the Pedal Safe program. We couldn't go ahead if we didn't have a loan fleet. So many kids don't own bikes or scooters. So it makes the program accessible to all kids, not just the kids that own a scooter or a bike. The funding for the running the actual program will come out of my road safety budget. So we'd utilise my existing cycle instructors. So it'll come out of my road safety fund. Yeah.
Well, this question, interestingly, look, I used to commute from West Auckland on one of these scooter things, but 20 years ago, actually, I used to scoot from the top of Queen Street all the way down. It was pretty
hairy.
No, it was pretty hairy, but well, it was before it was sort of dawn-ish time, so there wasn't many cars, but I went through a few shoes burning out, but I was interested, wrist guards, because I've come off, I mean, is that a thing? That seems to be the thing I noticed.
We'd talk through all sorts of safety things with the students, but ideally we wouldn't have kids going that fast on our program.
Even on a footpath, it's the footpath which is the worst, but the road is the smoothest. The roads are generally, it's the footpaths or the ruts. They're usually small wheels.
Yeah, and that's the purpose of the program, is to teach them about how to prepare to ride your scooter properly. You know, what are you wearing, all that kind of stuff.
And what to look out for, stones and crossing points. You've got to be really careful on a scooter, even when you're, going.
Because the wheel's so small. That's the problem. No, that's what I'm saying. Wrist guards, really. I don't see anyone wear them, but I started wearing them for a while.
Good point. Good point.
All right.
Well, courtesy of,
Thank you.
Well done, ladies, looking for these opportunities. Appreciate that. I see that will come from the background and it's successful.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Right.
So we can vote on that?
Yeah.
All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Gary. Right. 5.6, delegation of power, ministerial consent under section 48.1 of the Reserves Act. Karen, what a wonderful subject.
I hope it's a short subject. I'm good, thank you. No, Tasmania. Yes, I was whining and dining this time last week, so. So this matter is something that has been requested of us to put in place as a matter of efficiencies to delegate the ministerial powers to consent to easements over reserves that are currently exercised by the Reserves and Roading Committee, or sometimes Council, to the Chief Executive instead. As I say, it's driven by the need for efficiency and to not bog roading and reserves down with matters that don't require their oversight. So it's not an exclusive delegation. If we feel that the matter is complicated, not straightforward, got public interest component, it can be accelerated back up to committee or council, even the minister. Now, my report does have a couple of items requiring clarification. So this delegation proposal relates only to ministerial powers under section 48 of the Reserves Act, no other ministerial consent powers under the Reserves Act. It also relates only to reserves that are vested in council and of which it is the administering body. So it doesn't relate to any of the reserves covered by the Mana Whakahono and for which the Turangi Co-Governance Committee is the administering body. And so the recommendation in the paper doesn't apply to that committee, and I would like to reword that. Karen Watts has got the rewording, the recommended rewording, and I'm hoping you will agree with that. That makes it absolutely clear it doesn't relate to Turangi Co-Gov. And that's it. Thank you. It won't make it redundant. There are many other things that we'll consider. Yeah. Yeah. But
But no, what the recommendation change?
I've got the rewording up there just to make it absolutely clear that it doesn't cover the reserves, that whilst vested in council, the CoGov committee is the administering body. It's implicit, but I didn't make it absolutely clear. So, yeah. Thank you.
The health and wellbeing quarterly update 5.7. And Michelle.
Good afternoon, all. Am I on? Yes, you are. Of course. Right. The report for this last quarter, as you will see, we've done quite a refreshed approach to health and safety and been implementing with the start of the rollout. And one is the policy and the strategy, which is in front of you. The strategy has really focused around engagement and leadership as two key focus areas and supported by our safe systems and our continuous improvement program. There's also a bit of data on just our incident management at the moment, or the current state of it, and just welcome any feedback on any of the report. Yeah.
To say thank you for all your hard work, because you've pulled together a huge body of work in a very short space of time, and I wanted to acknowledge that. Thank you.
Oh,
Thank you, Councillor Shepherd.
thank you.
Any other questions? Councillor Campbell and then Councillor Fassel.
I just did aggressive behaviours declined the last 3 months. And summer helps.
I don't know. I think staff and employees do tend to normalise some behaviours, and possibly the reporting's down. You know, I think in all health and safety risks, there is always that threat of risk normalisation, and people don't start reporting, just think it's part of BAU. What we have, that's why we're sort of introducing this traffic light system of what incidents really trigger different levels. You know, what's just, not that any abuse is acceptable, but what is abuse at a minor level, just with words, and what is actual threats to personal safety. And that's where we're looking at rolling out the traffic light system, where red is where intervention by police or sentry.
You had a comment earlier. Thank you for this. It's comprehensive. The policy is really good. The whole work plan, I've read through it in detail and appreciate it. Just a couple of questions, and this is more for clarity. So, page 61 of our agenda, if I look at the incident management traffic light system, there you've got 15 pending, not started. And I look at that, but this is for a 3-month period. At first glance, that obviously opens some questions up. Are these 2.5 months old, or were they yesterday or the day before this was? So I'm just wondering whether we could put a little bit more clarity in there, or just it's a timeline thing, really.
It is a timeline thing, and we are addressing that through training with what is an acceptable time frame for an incident such as pending and not started. And this report was written 3-4 weeks ago prior to for circulation, and I'm just doing another report, and the results are pleasingly with the numbers of pending not started reduced significantly. So I think moving forward you will see you won't see those initially alarming stats.
Can I just also reflect on the numbers have dropped markedly from the last report as well?
Yeah.
So thank you for that as well. So the system's obviously working.
Thank you.
Rankin.
I just wanted to agree that, excuse me, it's an excellent piece of work, and you don't realise the trouble you're going to get into until it all goes wrong. And I think you've covered everything. We've been really lucky that nothing big has gone wrong. You know, a lot of boards that I've been on really said have this is the number one thing on their agenda, and it's examined in absolute detail every month, because if something goes wrong, you pay an awful lot of money, and you go through a process that nobody wants to go through. So I think you've covered it really, really well. I agree. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
I congratulate you for your report and the work that's gone into it as well. I guess I'm just concerned moving forward, rates and things like that. And while we certainly receive a lot of feedback, we're not the person that's going to be there taking the rates payments, especially in light of the first round isn't going to be struck. So it's going to be the second, third and fourth that are even larger than what they would have been large. I'm just really worried about the people that are at that front line.
And that's our call centre, and the team at the call centre are very aware of the impacts of decisions and what's happening locally and with central government and how that affects our communities.
So I guess I'm just
thank you.
I'm sure you have it under control. Well, it's just some extra.
I think it's
emphasis from this table. For them being
thank you.
That person.
I think it's the awareness of preempting that this potentially can happen, and just providing some support for our different fronts across council, whether they're any of our customer facing roles, just making sure we've got some good support systems in place to monitor and deal with behaviours as they come through.
Thank you.
Just a quick question around cultural and maybe even spiritual elements within safety and well-being. Do you think they were carefully considered as a part of this?
Seriously, I think there's always room for improvement in that area, and having our community engagement and iwi groups as part of our health and safety committees really helps improve our awareness that we don't just get channeled in health and safety. So, very good point. Thank you. Nothing back from WorkSafe or the coroner's report. So no further developments in that area. No, nothing. We've had nothing from them, and we don't really expect to until they have something conclusive to send to us. Julie can answer that.
Any other questions? Louise, anything there?
No, I think Michelle's covered, and I just wanted to say thank you for your support, and we look forward to working with the rest of the organisation to try and drive some systemic improvements in this space. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Do I have a moment? Thank you, Councillor Rankin. Press aye. Yes. Thank you, ladies.
Thank you.
Right. Adoption of statement of business. 5.9, Taupō District Council performance report. Julie, any opening comments here?
Look, I think you can possibly see the few things before we get into comments. For those that can spot our organisation. So comment in here. It hasn't added that to the challenges. Also just want to welcome Tony. The operation of delivery. Is there any to answer questions in terms of the gene?
It's ready to go. Good afternoon, Jeanette. Thank you very much for your report.
Kia ora. I would like to take the report as read, and I'm happy to answer any questions. It's followed its normal format of financial presentation.
Councillor Scott.
No, not quick. Comment. I just want to acknowledge publicly the work that you're doing within the finance team in particular, and just put on record that we are acutely aware of the pressure you're under, and we do appreciate the work that you and your team are doing, and thank you for that.
Thank you.
Under extreme pressure, we get it. If we could make it go away, we would, but we can't. So keep going. But seriously, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Worship. Is the amount from central government for the Turangi Channel funding the final amount? There's no more coming from them?
I'm sorry, that's not a question I can answer.
Oh,
Pernell may be able to answer that question. I'm not across the contract.
Sure, I can find that later on.
Oh, okay, thanks, Jeanette. And just echo the deputy mayor's words. Thank you.
Thank you, Bishop.
Right, who's next up? Lovey. Now.
Do you want me to? I can if you want to. More green light.
Tēnā koutou. I was going to ask you daughters if you wanted to stand up and stretch and breathe for a moment. Keep it brief, won't we, Tess? Good afternoon, Worship. We're very well. Just thought, obviously, we'll take the report as read, but I just wanted to give you a couple of updates because we're in the process of refreshing the components of the significant projects report, adding in more projects essentially as we trawl along through the financial year with a view to how something might look in the long-term plan timeframe as well. This is obviously 23 projects, but interestingly enough, when we crunch the numbers, it represents 75% of our capital budget across the 23-24 annual capital plan. So these are the more complicated, bigger. There are some that don't have any budget associated with them, but we're talking about them because they're critical, such as LTP or Three Waters reform. So it'll be, I'm looking forward to checking in with you next month about some of the additional projects we're looking to add to this list without making it too long. One of the other key things, and I know Tom has just recently spoken to you about the drinking water standards, because of the proliferation of projects in the space at the moment, I feel that it's important to provide more information across the program of Drinking Water Standards New Zealand projects. You're only seeing a couple of the more kind of current larger scale, and there's a number of smaller ones which are as important across the district. So we'll probably look to provide a way to report that in such a way that you can see that they're all kind of gradually tracking through, and they're interlinked and related in terms of their resources and the expertise that we use. So just, yes.
Was a little bit concerning because lots of red dots.
Yes, yes.
And I see that it has a lot to do with timing and that costs are expected to be higher due to increased cost fluctuations being significantly more than anticipated. Sort of understand with the Kinloch situation with that piling and the issues faced here, but it does seem to be sort of the same reasoning right through. Is that because you can't get the resources or it's spread very quickly? Is that why the fluctuations are so extreme or unpredicted?
Well, I guess the first point that I'd like to make is, as I mentioned, this is a snapshot of the more significant, more complex projects. We do have water at the front end of the report, and that is, as you know, got a lot of pressure on it at the moment in terms of meeting compliance. These are multi-year projects, so when something delays it by 6 weeks, that can delay it by a number of weeks at the end. And we've also kicked off projects, in this case, 18 months, 24 months ago, where, as you know, inflation was at its peak around July of last year, I think. So we've experienced a slowdown in inflation, but it doesn't mean prices aren't going up. And so it's basically reset the price at which we're prepared to pay. Or what we must pay, I should say, to receive the same good. Yes. I know no one's prepared to pay these things for cheese at the supermarket, but we must, unfortunately, if we want to continue eating cheese.
No, thank you. I did wonder if it was just because there were so many lengthy delays and then they one thing on to the other, a bit of a domino effect.
Well, there actually is, in terms of Kinloch and Omori, they have the exact same resource pool and the same company that we're using because it's the same technology. So that's why I think it was important to perhaps bring those projects together so that we can talk about them as a whole. Obviously, the membrane and the UV are different, but there's a long program of work in regards to meeting Taumata Arawai standards. But yes, it's not necessarily a great idea to have it this much red unless you're playing Connect 4.
Yeah.
Likely, the standard likely to stay the same given the predicament the country's in, and we're like, I mean, we've set these standards and Three Waters is gone, and yeah. Do you have an update on the direction of travel?
Through the chair, not entirely, but I don't believe that things are going to change. I'm pretty sure that that broad brush approach will stay. And certainly I've been in conversations with Taumata Arawai the end of last week around some of their expectations of compliance with protozoa barriers and some of their suggestions around an enforced undertaking. So that there is some changes, and I think there might be some movement, but I don't think that there's going to be any change in the requirement of the drinking water quality rules at all.
So how do we sit from a risk perspective then? I mean, those fees for not meeting standards and people getting sick. I'd hate to see Nigel made busier than what he is already, to be fair.
So, yeah, from chair again. So Nigel and I are having some good chats about that exact topic, and we have taken some legal advice on why approach. So we're just digesting that at the moment. But certainly, I mean, we have a program of work. And we've
some
yeah, we're
credibility, I guess you'd say.
Interestingly, with my conversation last week with Taumata Arawai, they use Taupō as a benchmark. So they looked at us on our approach, our funding that we have, our capital outlay that we've got, and the way we're approaching it, and the way that we react and work with them. You know, we're very transparent. Nicola and the team, Tom and the guys, who do an amazing job. So we've got a really good rapport with that team.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Sorry, that wasn't directly related.
And just to add on,
It's just seeing the red and knowing that we've got the red, knowing that these regulations are there and the potential risk to health, but also to penalties.
maybe just to add from a public perspective, certainly watching, but obviously an extensive water testing system in place to meet drinking water standards. There's a whole range of measures that we place to manage the public risk.
Thank you.
Good luck. But the acquisition of the one little bit of land, you know.
Oh, for the reservoir,
Yeah, that's what it is.
the golf course land.
Yes.
Yes, I think that's still work in progress. There's forward movement and then backward movement. Hopefully it's 3 steps forward and only 2 back, but I know Travis and Tom have been working on that to try and contact the landowner.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, thank you.
Obviously, if you talk.
I will. I'll pass it on.
Yeah. Very good.
Through the chair, did Councillor Greenslade have another question regarding Turangi Street revitalisation? Yes.
Just wondered where we were up to on the cost, Peniel, because I see it's gone into amber. What's the story with the street revitalisation?
So I know that Peter Van Niekerk, who's the project manager for this, had set some money aside in the long-term plan to complete some additional components. Like there's always a couple of extra streets with Turangi Street revitalisation, isn't there? I know we've received our milestone 6 payment from MB, which was about 2.6 million, and we've got 1 milestone payment to request. and that's before the end of the financial year. And there was a small amount of cleanup to do. Essentially, we have until the end of this calendar year to complete the project to meet the requirements of MBIE's contract. So the additional funding that was previously put in, and I don't know if it's still in the long-term plan because obviously there's a lot of other mechanisms in play, was to complete some of the additional requests. But as far as I understand, it's just an amber. But, you know, I know Peter works very, very stringently with his dollars. So I know that he's looking to ensure that all the scope was met.
There was one further question, which is completely out of left field and not my neck of the woods. When the New Zealand Wakeboard Championships were held at Mangakino a couple of weeks ago, they discovered that there was no access to power there in the new development.
Interesting.
Yes, so perhaps just leave that with you. Thank you very much. Project upgrade.
Through the chair, I do know that phase 2 of the Mangakino lakefront upgrade is obviously got some money set aside in the LTP, and probably Kirsty would be the one to understand the detail of the scope a little more, but there were some big chunks of scope in that, which I don't know if that included power, but I'll check with Chris in regards to what was planned for phase 1.
Thank you.
Problem.
Just getting on to the, you know, lakefront, I was checking to one of the people who are running the coffee van down there. Yeah, there's no power, the generator burned out the other day. She was so busy. It's a bit of a priority to get some sort of power down there.
Okay, thank you. Tessa, as you know, works in my team and she is Stakeholder Specialist Project Manager, and she's currently working on the Southern Trunk Main project. I thought I'd bring her along today because even though you get 2 sentences on this project, it's happening now, and obviously it's quite a big deal for us as a community in terms of capacity. So Tessa's really at the front line in terms of working with residents around what the change means for them. So I just wanted her to provide you with a little bit more detail in case you're out having one of those autumn barbecues and you're asked.
Yeah, so I'll just start off by explaining again, you know, it's to ensure the whole work is to ensure we're having a resilient wastewater network that is meeting the growth of the town. Feedback so far has been positive. Everyone's pretty understanding that the work just needs to happen. We're beginning construction next week. You might have seen a little bit of hydrovacing happening outside of the Braintree last week, but officially construction starts on Tuesday. So that's for phase 1. So we've split the project up into 5 phases. So phase 1 is going from the Kaimanawa Reserve along Kaka Street, Pātaka, and then Media Road. And then they'll start back at the other end, which is the Carter Place end of Lake Terrace along to Richmond Avenue. So the project will, the expected completion for the entire upgrade is November to roughly December 2024. We've started a letter drop explaining the whole wider project to all the residents that are affected, and then as they're encompassed in the phases of the project, the construction team will drop them off letters saying how it will affect them directly with traffic management and things. We've got a cultural advisor appointed from Waipahihi Marae, so that's just to ensure we're getting things right from that end, especially as we come along Lake Terrace closer to the marae and the Urupara. And yeah, there'll be more traffic management in place, so expect to see road cones, but we've asked contractors to have these packed down for things like the V8 Supercars weekend. Yeah, so the new pipeline will come along Lake Terrace, but then cut along to Meadow Road, Pātaka Street, and then along to Kaka, Yeah.
Has anyone seen this house?
Yes, I have seen his house.
His lawn.
Yes. There are some beautiful lawns on Kaka Street. I don't have that in front of me, but yeah, I'll have to come back to you on that one. Yeah, Kaka Street. I think we might. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. I can't answer that one, sorry. Yeah, no, that's all right.
But no, there's a particular quiet in Kaka Street, not to single out customers, but local flowers.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yes. Yeah, yeah. So he certainly received the letter. It would have been in his letterbox. Yeah. Any other questions?
No. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Any further questions on the exec? The report. All right, there's a recommendation up there. On the reports. We come to green flag signifying for Whisper. All those in favour, please say aye. Yes. Carry. Right, what next? Appointments. 5.10, council appointments for April, planning and conference opportunities. Oh, Karen, sorry, Karen.
So there are some additional appointments that have been added to the diary. And so there's the long-term workshop on the 2nd of April, 10 to 2 p.m. That's the Tuesday after Easter. And then on Tuesday the 9th, there's a workshop accessibility and pedestrian improvement in the network. And then now an extraordinary council meeting on the 16th of April. And then moving down to the end of the month, there is a Taupō and Taupō East Rural Community Grant Distribution Committee meeting on the 30th of April, for the day of the council meeting.
Very sad to hear. Given news that. All right, any questions, Karen? Move it, please. Councillor Shepherd, speaking by Councillor Westburn.
Sorry, there's two other items on the agenda page.
I see. Oh, sorry. Chunk. No.
There's a provincial meeting and zone meeting coming up.
What do you?
Representation. And the second one is just a change at the representation for Wilder House.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Councillor Westman, for congratulations on the chair's role of Wairua House, following on from your mum, I think. So, yeah. Cool. Okay, so 1, 2, and 3. I have a minute. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carry. Right. Members' portfolio updates. Who do we go to first?
As reported this morning, I spent a lot of hours this last month on DGLT business, and they are now about to advise to replace the general manager who is leaving in a few weeks' time and has done an amazing job. And I attended the strategic planning session for Amplify, which was superb. That's all I had this month.
Not too much to add this month, actually, Worship, but I will just make mention of the under-20s tournament we had up in Zane Park, because that was quite it was a particularly good event to hold here over the course of 2 weekends, and it straddled the week as well. So we would have had some additional numbers to the area, which is, we know, is going to help vitalise CBD and hospitality businesses and so on and so forth. So well done to the team for getting that here, and also well done to the teams who have been looking after this so well out there too.
Is there a contractual arrangement, you know?
Hey, fellas, the clubs around town, I saw a group at United, a young gentleman who quite took the community. They were providing some wonderful entertainment. I thought they were an absolute addition to the community.
I'm not sure about the billeting arrangements, but they were most certainly very present in the community here and there. Up at the schools, I know that a few of the high-profile team members.
Weekend started at Mangakino.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, they really immersed themselves in the district community. Yeah.
They're a lot bigger than when I was on the train. No, well done. Thanks, Rachel, for being that or being supportive of that. It's a big spin. It's great. Yeah. Right, you can take Councillor Karen.
Yeah, a few things. We had a Turangi Rangatahi hub. I just wanted to take the opportunity to thank our new hub manager, Gina Poi, who's doing a fantastic job of facilitating both leadership and school holiday programs within our community. She's done a fantastic job. I just wanted to make mention of that. Also, I did miss the Taupō Youth Hub hui yesterday, but by all accounts, our youth agencies within the Taupō region are going great guns as well. I had the privilege of attending the Tūwharetua Taiao. They had a kura Taiao environmental hui in Pākira Marae. It was over a 2-day period. They also had a youth a rangatahi panel who got to talk on the environment, who were incredibly well articulate, very knowledgeable in this space, and were able to provide incredible insight into that as well. And I just wanted to thank the organisers, Poipoia, who did a great job in the Kura Taiao case over the weekend at Pākira Marae here in Taupo. We also had our Te Maruata annual hui, which is a collective of Māori district councillors throughout the motu. That was online this year, but we got to elect new members to the Ropu Whakahaere. It was a great turnout, and yeah, I just wanted to mention that. So also a privilege to be a part of the pōwhiri for Andrew over in Rotorua as well earlier this month. All went really well, and I'm really happy I got to catch up with Gina Rangi over the weekend at the Kura Taiao kaupapa, who said he's going great guns at the moment. I'll get a couple of weeks in, so that's good to hear. But that's it from me. Kia ora tātou.
A couple of the jobs this week, and I think he got it. Cool. Oh, thanks, Karen. I appreciate that, Karen. Right, Councillor John, anything from arts and culture?
Which is I joined the Zoom meeting for the Taupo strategic meeting. Of course, next week we have a Zoom meeting here in the Survey created by Canada. We get collective with them. So yeah, probably we go forward to something. There's a 3 year. Very positive. Collective doing that. Rachel, I'll be joining that. We'll join that Tuesday, and we have a funding allocation on paper for the second.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you, John. Community safety.
Through this report, the CCTV project is bubbling away in the background, but there's no update in relation to that. Just a couple of other quick points in terms of other matters. The public record, the Waikato Regional Transport Committee hearings on the regional land transport plan been postponed from today to mid-April. Primarily because the NZTA do not have any firm commitment on what their funding streams will look like. So that miles our deliberations on that. And final chapter for our own district plan. Finished deliberations on that yesterday. So that's going through a final report, which will be with the planning and policy team in due course, and will end its way up here. But we'll work in progress. Thanks.
Food production, Kylie.
Just great to have Taihan here from the Greater China region, running that for Fonterra. Had some other key people in town today as well. They're travelling on to Rotorua tonight, so I'll travel over there to join them. Good to see Fonterra's annual results, annual profit up 23%. That will ricochet through our community. The number of farms that we have out here, I just note the sad passing of Pete Williams last week. He'll be a loss to the communities. Thank you.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you, Kylie. Yvonne, any
Yes, attended the KHB monthly meeting and also the Green Taupo strategic meeting discussing the next 10 years. On the Waipahi Chemical Society's AGM was on Sunday the 24th, and through our office at Bailey's, we hosted the business after 5 for the supercars, and the pilot from the Taupō District Council speak at that event.
Thank you, Bishop. The Turangi Co-Governance Committee held a workshop actually at the beginning of the month, and it was followed by their meeting. Very, very worthwhile workshop. I actually attended a DGLT meeting talking about the new logo, which they've been working on recently. And on the 20th of March, I attended the official opening of the aquaponics program at the National Trout Centre. And all credit to Bevan Severinson and the board there, which are doing an amazing job. Encourage anyone to run by to go and have a look at what you're doing. Along with 2 other councillors, I went to the Amplify Strategic Planning workshop, and we all commented on the amazing job that Amplify are doing for our district. And funds that they receive from council are certainly well used. And the Mangakino Reserve Management Plan Committee is ongoing. Just remind anybody who's interested in that those meetings are all public and anybody is. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you very much. Duncan?
Please, Your Worship, just 2 things. Yeah, I'm just informing that I recently submitted a complaint to the Ombudsman about the council culture here, which I do not find to be sufficiently transparent or open, including with respect to the legislative role to provide information and advice to elected members. And I recognise I may be only speaking for myself in that respect. I'll just clarify that one. I mean, this is my personal opinion again, but I believe this culture may have contributed to some unfortunate decision making in the past, and I think this carries on today. It certainly is for me. The second point, ratepayer surveys. I'm just wanting to suggest this is something this council starts doing, because I perceive some assumptions being made of what the public really wants. Nationwide opinion polls typically sample 1,000 people with a stated margin of error of just 5%, which suggests a random sample of just 100 people would be adequate for Taupo. And I think these